Hey, beloved ones. So, I'm actually doing something a little different because this is my husband, Kyle. And we are going to talk about our favorite movies of 2021. So, I'll go ahead and let him introduce himself.
Hi. Yes, I'm Anna's husband, Kyle, and I like movies a lot. So I saw quite a few this year, and we like watching movies together. So we sort of had a conversation about some of our favorite movies, and we've had a few people tell us, "Hey, you guys really need to do some videos and
Kyle's
talk
parents.
about this." Yeah, my
Hi, Pete
parents
and Mindy.
and so I mean, here we are, and we really love Doug Walker and some of these talking heads on the internet that do this. So we thought we'd give it a shot, and we're kind of just gonna sit here and talk and see how it goes. So
Yep.
yeah. Anyway,
So we'll probably get better as we do more of these, and that's the hope. We've already been talking about maybe ranking the Disney live action remakes and talking about what they did right and what they did wrong. So stay tuned for more of these.
mostly wrong.
Very, very wrong.
Yeah. Anyway, you're all right. We just
Yeah.
want to dive right in.
Let's do it.
I wanted to start out by talking about, I think it was both of our number one movie of the year, and that was Summer of Soul, which is a documentary that came out in the summer, conveniently enough. And this was the DJ / musician Questlove directed his first movie, and it was a documentary, and basically he gathered this footage that had been sitting in a storage closet or something like that for like 50 years, 40, 50 years. And this was basically the Harlem Cultural Festival was this, they called it basically the Black Woodstock. And it was this incredible arts and music festival that was like right in the heart of the civil rights movement, and conversations over race and justice and police brutality, and the way that art was infused with those things. And there was this beautiful, beautiful concert, not just a concert, but a gathering of African American leaders, politicians, singers, musicians, up and coming artists, and this footage that was shot is absolutely mind blowing. To even think that, I mean, some people might be familiar with the Woodstock documentary, which is really, really good, but the fact that this was not seen by anybody until this year, and it was or last year, I guess, when the movie came out, just this incredible vibrancy to this really essential part of Black culture and part of Black history that I think has really been washed over because of the fact that we haven't seen this footage. So for Questlove to be able to arrange this footage together in a way that makes you really care about the socio-political context of what happened makes this documentary even better. But if you just going by the performances, absolutely earth-shattering. Some of the best live recordings I've ever seen. Like in terms of a concert documentary, this is like up there with the best that have ever been made. And so you got Stevie Wonder, Mahalia Jackson, Nina Simone, Mavis Staples. Yeah, Gladys Knight and the Pips were on there, I think, and Sly and the Family Stone. I mean, and it's just like if you didn't love these singers before, you will after watching this movie. You're gonna want to go back and listen to what they're doing. So I mean, I think that just for both of us in terms of the emotional impact that this film had, it felt I had a word that I was using to describe it. It's rare that I use truly. Let's see. You know what? I'm gonna look it up because I have it on my list right here. Just this idea of transcendent. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what I'm looking for. Like almost an out of body experience. Like this is like an instant. As soon as you see it, it's like this is a 10 out of 10 classic masterpiece of a documentary. So that's why it's our number one.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And we did go to the theater to see it, even though it's on Hulu. But if you have Hulu, watch it like right now. Like stop this video and go watch it because it's amazing.
And then you'll know what we're talking about.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
We won't sound like a bunch of crazy people.
So yeah, and as a photographer who has done events, weddings, and concerts, I loved this documentary because I felt like the photography work was truly excellent. It made you feel like you were a part of the audience at this event. Shots of kids sitting in trees watching and the women with their hats. And it was this slice of the US at that moment in time. And I think that was what was so powerful, was you felt like you were going back in time and experiencing it. And it was also, I think that's what's so powerful about the empathetic effect of this documentary, is because you see the political and social and racial things that were happening in the country. And you see the pain because Martin Luther King's death had not been that long ago. And they were singing Take My Hand, Precious Lord, which was his favorite song. And it was just this truly just heartbreaking and yet hopeful moment of remembering him and these people who had been given so much hope for their future. And it was, I really loved also how they talked about the faith of some of the people. There was a family of singers, these men who were believers, and they were so kind and generous to letting them talk about their faith and their struggles, the ways that the church responded to these people being in secular music, even though they were singing spiritual songs, and the struggle these men had to stay purely devoted to God as they sought to be in the music industry. And I thought that was really powerful. I thought all of these very worshipful songs sung on a huge stage was also really powerful. And the ways that music for people was an expression of their faith. It was an expression of a cry for justice, and just the power of music in general. I think that's why it affected me so deeply. And seeing in the theater was also incredible. She got that theater sound system because these performances were just so good. And so I think that the effect of the empathy of watching this documentary, of seeing people's pain, and the way that it put that concert in a historical context of this is what was happening, this is why these songs meant so much to these people. And even the honesty. He wasn't gonna pretend that some people saying uncomfortable things wasn't there. I think it was just that was what was so good about it too, was it was just, this is what people were feeling and thinking. This is the healthy ways they processed it, and perhaps some ways that were misdirected, and yet here it all is. Here's the honest truth about what this thing was. And in the end, there's just so much beauty. And that's why I loved it so much, was the way that it portrayed the beauty of this slice of America and the culture and the music. It's powerful. So yeah, check it out.
Yeah. And then did you want me to start on the next one? So I actually sort of kind of cheated on my number one, but it's my list, so I can do whatever I want. The Procession is another documentary that was equally profound, and this just came out on Netflix not very long ago. I think in maybe late November.
I think so, yeah.
And Netflix actually produced this documentary, and Robert Greene, who's just an incredible documentary filmmaker, did this really intimate and painful and ultimately very moving and profound. Like if you get through this movie without shedding some tears, I think you're doing something wrong with your life, because it's so they brought these guys together that had all been victims of sexual abuse in the Catholic diocese. I think it was St. Louis.
Yeah.
And or Kansas City.
It was like Missouri, yeah. Right?
Yeah. And they didn't all live in Kansas City, but they were all like, you could trace it back to this. They had these priests that would get moved around to these different churches or these different whatever you call it, cathedrals or
parishes.
Yeah, parishes.
Maybe,
there you go.
that the word?
And anyway, so these guys came together with what they call a drama therapist, which is just an absolutely fascinating concept. And they actually each made a short film in which they recreated, if not explicitly in terms of the sexual abuse, the emotional timbre of the way that this abuse affected their childhood and how it's still affecting it today. So it kind of weaves in the you get to see their short films or pieces of their short films, and then I'll kind of go back and show them making the short film behind the scenes. And there's also just interviews and scenes with these men going about their daily lives. What are some of the routines and habits? What are some of the coping strategies they've had to come up with? And these men are just deeply, deeply wounded, but they are willing to come together and like face this horrible, horrible history that they all share in common and find some meaning out of it. And one of the things I really liked was that the boy they hired to play the young version of the men, they use the same boy in all the movies to kind of show that there's that universality to their stories, while also talking about specifics. And just their relationship with the actor who plays the boy is really nice as well. There's all this, there's this true, genuine like appreciation and love that this young boy was willing to take on such a serious role, and his parents were willing to say like, this is important, we really support this and appreciate this. So it's in much like Summer of Soul, it's about the way that art can be healing for people, like deeply spiritually healing, and I think that the way that God moves through art, especially, and man, like that art therapy is something that is really, really cool. Mm-hmm. And I'm like super like, I want to like know more about art therapy now, and like drama therapy, and like, because that's what it is. I mean, that's therapy, is acting out roles. It's imagining yourself in situations that maybe or looking at it from a different lens or angle. And so, yeah, I'd be curious to know if you have any thoughts, especially on the therapy angle of it. Mm-hmm. What you're thinking.
Yeah. So it was really powerful for me because I'm actually going through EMDR to process some trauma in my life. And so EMDR is actually going to that place where something traumatic happened, but seeing it kind of as yourself now as an adult observing, or like a fly on the wall type situation. And so it's interesting because that's a lot of what these men were doing, even though in some ways they were revisiting the sites where the trauma happened, or one guy was having recurring nightmares at this location. Mm-hmm. And so the courage it took for him to actually physically go to that location was really powerful. And I think that's what was powerful about this movie in general, was that in this documentary, these men repeatedly are going and choosing to enter into this in order to find healing, in order to take it from a thing that was never adequately processed as a child that continues to plague them, and saying, now I'm going to go to this place as an adult, revisit this place, and realize that it no longer has to have power over me. And so that's a process that has to happen. It needs to be done with a lot of oversights of having that therapist there to help them work through it was really important. But at one point, that the man that was having nightmares, I think it was the same guy, right? He actually wrote a letter to his child self. And I think that's another thing that I'm learning to do as well, is to really speak truth over myself and say, no, like, you are brave, and really to start to believe the truth where the lie was sown. And that's the other thing I thought was so powerful about this, is the ways that truth and lies have to kind of find that have to battle it out, and like the truth has to win over where lies originally were. And a lot of abuse is predicated on a lie, is blaming the child and the abuser, trying to deceive other people. And so I think anything that brings truth to light in a way that brings healing is really powerful. And that's the other thing I thought was really, really special about this, is just the ways that it was in a way that wasn't exploitative and wasn't overly graphic. They were able to bring truth and able to tell these men's stories. And what I liked, what my husband said in his thing about his favorite movies, was he mentioned that they address anger, and the fact that anger is not a place where you're meant to camp out. Anger is something you need to feel as you process. And so I think that they gave these men the space throughout this documentary to process all of these emotions, but ultimately to find peace and to find a way to look at those things that happened, to be compassionate toward themselves, but to move past being a victim to being a survivor. And so that's what I really liked about it too.
Yeah, no, totally. I get to talk about Nomadland. All right, so Nomadland was, as most of you probably know, it won the Best Picture. Then again, it was like the lowest rated Oscars telecast in like decades. So maybe you didn't watch it, and maybe you have no idea what I'm talking about. But so due to the extended eligibility deadlines that came about because of COVID, I think they're doing it this year too. I mean, the Oscars are going to be in like April or something, which is really late, assuming that they do it at all, depending on case numbers and things like that. Anyway, the point being, Nomadland didn't make it on my list for 2020 because the only way that we could see it, really anybody could see it outside of critic circles, was when it came out on Hulu. Hulu picked it up and released it, and that was like mid-February. So it was too late for this year, but I said, you know what, this is like number one on every critic's list, so I imagine it's going to be close to mine, and it is. because it's really, really, really good. Um, Frances McDormand won another Oscar. She's a 3-timer now, and she's just such an amazing actress, and I think she was perfect for this role because she can play an every man or an every woman in a way that she doesn't have kind of the movie star glamour, I guess, if you will, so to speak. Like she can be really beautiful. She can look really beautiful, and she can really look. But I think a lot of her best roles come from Fargo. She was like pregnant, like huge pregnant in that movie, and like she's willing to like look a little gritty, but it allows you to like really see her as someone who could be anybody. And for this movie, that's really important because it's about real life nomads that are essentially, I mean, you could call them homeless, I guess, but most nomads wouldn't really want you to think of them as homeless because really everywhere is their home. And so a lot of the actors in the movie are actual real life nomads that Chloe Zhao, the director, she won a Best Director Oscar very deservedly. And I think that she was able to really get this raw authenticity. There's this other movie she made before called The Writer. So like I've been a fan of her since before it was cool to be a fan. And it was kind of the same thing where she was talking about this guy that had gotten a skull fracture. Like he'd been a rodeo rider, and the guy in the movie was played by the real life guy that the story's based on, who actually has the brain trauma. So I mean, to get into that level of authenticity, but still be able to sell it as a movie. Frances McDormand and David Strathairn are pretty much the only actors that are in the movie that are like actors. As far as I mean, there might be some of the background roles might be played by like character actors. I'm not sure, but seems like for the most part they have these real life nomads, and they just she just goes to these different places, takes these odd jobs. It's the Great Recession, and her husband has passed away, and they were a kind of a factory family where they stayed in one place and some kind of mining, I think it was. And so she just kind of goes around and she embraces this lifestyle, and it's just really incredible movie. The cinematography is so wonderful. I think it won for cinematography too. And it's just beautiful, and it's lived in, and it's just unforgettable. It's like one of those movies where it's like put your phone down, watch it, really, really watch it, because you're going to just find so much to really latch onto, whether it's just a small conversation here, a look here, a moment of clarity. And it's just one of those movies where like it's over and you're just like, I could just keep watching this woman like live this and go through her life, because in a way it's not a glamorous life, but it's kind of, when you think about how much we value stuff and materialism, and you look at the way that these people are living, and it's very like, I don't know, it's just it's attractive in some ways, and you're just like, I don't think I would have the strength or dignity to be able to do that and do it with gladness and joyfulness, as opposed to, oh, I don't have a home, or I'm not, I don't have like, health benefits or whatever. Like, I think so many of us, if we lost that stuff, would feel remorseful, maybe bitter, and we would just want to lash out. But like these people don't do that. So it's a very gentle and kind story too. It doesn't look on anybody with pity, but it's just an appreciation for a way of life that most of us would find untenable. And so I think that's what makes it so powerful.
Yeah. And I think that also the power of community, and that was really sweet. The ways that these nomads that live out of vans or motorhomes all come to these campsites, like in Quartzsite. At one point, Kyle's like, "That's Quartzsite."
I was like, I've been there.
Yeah. So, but seeing all these people that find community, that share with each other, and are just so kind, and check in on each other and make sure they're okay. I thought that was really beautiful. And the fact that she used real life nomads for these roles, I thought made it feel almost like a documentary, that you were getting this really intimate and personal glimpse of the lives of a group of people that I didn't really know existed. And so I also really agree with Kyle's assessment of the ways that these people are disconnected from kind of the ambition that most people have, the striving for more stuff, the striving for riches. Like they just go from job to job, but yet find contentment in even just mundane things. And the other thing that I've heard other people talk about that I agree with is the way that the grandeur of creation is expressed. She works at a national park at one point. She visits beautiful places, and there's a peacefulness in that. And there's actually one scene of nudity where she's swimming in a national park in the water. So beware, there is full nudity, but it's not sexual. But I just thought that immersing in creation and that just peace that comes from that was also felt very authentic and real. So
Yeah, and I
yeah.
think in terms of Oscars, like when you're talking about all-time great Best Picture winners, I mean, I feel like the last few years that people have been talking less about that. Maybe COVID has dulled our excitement or whatever, but like Nomadland is up there. Like, you talk about traditional Oscar bait movies, right? The last few years, the Academy's really avoided that. They did Parasite, which was the first foreign language film, which is not an Oscar bait movie, but it's strange and it's provocative and it's absolutely perfect. And I would say Nomadland is perfect too, like just a perfect movie. So yeah, hopefully you agree.
All right.
Well, let's go ahead and talk about a couple of animated movies that really got us jazzed. So go ahead and you can start it. You'll do the first one, I'll do the second one.
So I loved Encanto, and it was like a 4-tissue movie for me. Probably 5 counting the short film at the beginning. So even though it's not technically on this list, I do want to say that Far From the Tree is powerful, and go check that out since you're not going to have the theatrical experience of seeing it before the movie. It's
on Disney Plus along with Encanto, and it's like it better win the Oscar, because it's for animated short, because it's, I mean, I know it's Disney, but like,
yeah. Oh yeah. I mean,
the less said about it, the better. Just go check it out.
Okay. I was going to say, they managed to tell a story about generational trauma and being healthier than the last generation in a really emotionally profound way using raccoons that look adorable. So enough said. Yeah. But beware that you're probably going to cry. So, but anyway, Encanto for me, really, I think what's interesting about that movie is that the story, you could take it to be about family, about healing the rifts within a family, which is what the surface story is kind of about. But I think for me, it also really spoke to me about gifts and about the fact that we often look at other people and think they have it easier than us because they have gifts that maybe more people appreciate. And I think this could be a message for the church too, of like empathy for people who seem to, be in the spotlight more, but realizing they have their own struggles too. And that who you are and what you have is enough. And in fact, exactly what is needed. So I think that that's what really spoke to me as someone who tends to honestly envy the gifts of other people and feel like they just have it easier. They find their spot more than I do. And they tend to they are able to just make their lives work in a way that I'm not, which honestly isn't true. And I know that, but I still wrestle. And so for me, this movie spoke to me on a really deep level. But on a technical standpoint too, the music is so good. They've really done their research to really honor the music of Colombia and to even have a fully Spanish song in the movie.
Manuel Miranda.
Yeah, and there are Spanish translations of these songs. And I have to say that No Se Habla de Bruno, We Don't Talk About Bruno one is so great. I actually bought just that one on iTunes, but I'll probably buy the other soundtrack too. So soundtrack is great, just really brilliant. Lin-Manuel Miranda at his best. And it is gorgeous. The cinematography, the way that they used color, the way that they used kind of effect animation, it's really groundbreaking. And I feel like the other movie we're going to talk about is groundbreaking in different ways. But I feel like in a traditional 3D animated movie, the way that they've advanced their technology and managed to create this film is really spectacular.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't have much to add, but love it. So the other one is the Mitchells versus the Machines, which kind of sneakily came out on Netflix, and I think everybody who saw it just immediately fell in love with it. And a lot of critics are putting it on their top 10 lists if they're putting an animated movie, which unfortunately they often don't. That's another conversation. Yeah. But I mean, we were excited the first time we saw a trailer because it just seemed like the perfect sort of amalgamation of like everything I love about animation. Mm-hmm. Really, really funny, witty dialogue, tremendously clever, original setups, situations. This family essentially is the family that they have to, they're going on this road trip, and then there's basically robots take over the Earth, and they capture all the humans. But this family manages to escape from that, and then they have to sort of like learn to accept each other's flaws and love each other the way they are in order to work as a team to like save the world. So it's just the animation is really, really groundbreaking. There's a great mix of, because the girl at the center of the story is an artist, and so we get to go into her mind. We get to see her like little short film that she's making, and like her sketches and her drawings. So it integrates the 2D. The animation feels almost kind of cell shaded, where it's like it's 3D, but it also kind of has a 2D veneer to it. I don't know exactly how to describe it other than it looks really cool. And I mean, honestly, it kind of like almost has like a Simpsons kind of vibe to the writing, where there's this very quick, and I'm talking about like good Simpsons, early Simpsons, where it's like there's this real wittiness and rapport to the dialogue, but it's it's still family friendly. But it comes from Phil Lord and Chris Miller produced it, and we could probably do a 2-hour video on how much we love Into the Spider-Verse. Cloudy with the Chance of Meatballs and the Lego Movie, right? So these are the guys behind that. They didn't direct it, but I think they did co-write and produce it. And it's just, again, the funniest movie you'll see from this past year. I almost guarantee it. I mean, the pug, who doesn't love the pug, right? I mean, there's this pug in the movie that's just amazing. And there's just so many fresh surprises along the way, and it's just great voice actors. I mean, Maya Rudolph, just my favorite. I can't say enough good things. So yeah, you definitely need to check it out on Netflix if you haven't. Watch it with the whole family, because it's a great family film, but it's also just a brilliant movie in general.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's at least one like laugh till you cry scene, if not two, and probably more. I mean, I was literally like tears streaming down my face. I was laughing so hard. So I mean, it's great. The humor in it is just fantastic. And I listened to the Bancroft Brothers podcast. It's Tony and Tom Bancroft, who both work in Disney Animation and are now working as professors. And they interviewed Phil Lord, Chris Miller, and the guy that was mostly behind the movie. And the heart behind the movie, too, is that in some ways it's the little brother that sister is going off to college. And so it's the trip to take her to college. And so he was that little brother who watched his sister go off to college. And he actually did the voice of the little brother in this movie. So there's this really sweet heart of connection behind that. And listening to the podcast, you really see the ways that they tried to pull in all of these different people. Like they hired the production designer, I think that's our art director, off of like Instagram. They just liked her work. She's cool. Super young, had never done anything like this before, and she poured all of herself into this movie. Like they literally painted onto the frame with like drawings. Like it's, if you freeze frame it, like there's little hidden things all throughout this movie, and it just feels like you're inside the main character's mind. It's brilliant. And I think just like Into the Spider-Verse was groundbreaking for animation, I feel like this was too. And they did stuff that people don't do on movies, and maybe will eventually be copied by others because of how well it was done. So I just feel like in terms of Encanto and Mitchell's versus the Machines, Encanto is probably going to get way more attention, and it deserves it. Like I said, the in the traditional sphere of 3D animation, it's really, really good, and I think they push the boundaries. But in terms of what animated movies can be, I feel like they should push the boundaries even more, because it went outside the box, and it, they colored outside the lines, they drew on the frames, and they poured so much love into every frame of this movie. I just feel like that's what's so special about this, is you feel like nobody was half-hearted in any way with any part of this film. So that's what I loved about it so much, was that authenticity that I felt like it carried.
Yeah, and it really shows. And I think it's one of those ones you kind of want to shout about, because you know that Encanto is going to get the awards. And I'm not deservedly so. I love both of these movies equally, pretty much. But, the kind of rebellious spirit in you says, forget Disney, come on. This wasn't even nominated for a Golden Globe, Mitchell's vs. Machines. And I really, really hope it's not nominated for an Oscar, because, believe it or not, the Lego Movie wasn't even nominated for Best Animated Film at the Oscars the year it came out. And like, that's widely considered one of the best animated films of the past, decade. So get on it, guys.
Yeah. Well, and I feel like what was so great, what you were saying too, is that they managed to shade it and make it look really imperfect and lived in and gritty, and all of the human characters juxtaposed against these white robot characters that are so perfect and all the lines are clean versus everything like the jacket is scruffy of the dad. And I just feel like that message of being capable in spite of imperfections is a really powerful message, and that even those quirks that you have that might seem to be liabilities could be assets. And I just think that was really great too.
Yeah. Are you excited to talk about some musicals?
Yes.
Do you want to? Why don't you do for and I'll do West.
Great. Yeah, that sounds great. So I really loved In the Heights. It's the director John Chu, right?
Yeah, John M. Chu.
John M. Chu that did Crazy Rich Asians, and that movie was just gorgeous. And so giving him a chance to direct a musical with these big musical numbers was just spectacular. I mean, there's a scene at the pool with the aerial photography of what they're doing, and there's just a lot of creativity. At one point, there's even like animation, like they're drawing lines on the screen with their gestures, and
I forgot about that.
It's super creative and super playful and just very joyful. And there's also some depth of working through a loss and working through even just that kind of being a dreamer and trying to go to college and realizing that that's not possible and having to fight. And I just thought that what it did that was really powerful was it managed, again, kind of like Procession and Summer of Soul in the documentary genre, was to give you empathy for these characters and for people like them. I mean, Nomadland as well. I think that a movie done well really makes you understand what it's like to be in the shoes of someone. And so I think that this really was a beautiful movie about that Latin American kind of immigrant and second generation life, and the ways that some doors feel closed or people don't understand. And the ways that like the kind of grandmother character talks about asserting their dignity in small ways to make people know they're not invisible. And I just thought that there was so much in this movie that really did that really showed dignity and beauty. And so I really like that about this movie. And the music is great. I mean, obviously it's Lin-Manuel Miranda, what he did before Hamilton. And you can tell it's a labor of love for him too. Just like a lot of these movies were labors of love for those that made them. I feel that about this movie as well. And so I think the songs are great. There's the rap part of it as well. There's the Latin American influence in the music, some Spanish thrown in there. And there's also, like I said, just the ability to empathize with these characters and the journeys that they're on. And what Kyle talked about and we've been discussing too, is that this year, a lot of these movies have been about identity and the way that it finds expression in community. And so again, just like family in Encanto and community in Nomadland and all these things, it's these people who are trying to figure out who they are, and their community is helping them do that, and supporting them in these things. So I think that was really a cool part about this movie too.
Yeah, and then there's a few things to kind of jump off there, to see movies as empathy machines. That quote's attributed to somebody. I don't remember who, but I just love that phrase, empathy machines. It's an engine that helps you to put yourself in someone else's shoes and to empathize with them in a way that is powerful and lasting. The same thing with, I think, the power of community. Why is every one of these movies that we're going to talk about today, why do they all tie into that in some way? Well, COVID has really knocked the wind out of our sails when it comes to community. We've by necessity, in order to survive, become very self-isolated. And film is a way for us to kind of understand that is still something we need to strive for. It's not something to like, oh, when life gets back to normal, whenever that is, there, this idea that you can sort of reintegrate into community and maybe find a new community, and that it's not, that's not such a bad thing. I think people need that hope,
Yeah.
And, another thing about this year that's been really interesting is the semi-reemergence of the movie musical. So along with In the Heights, we had Steven Spielberg's West Side Story. There was also Dear Evan Hansen and Vivo and a few others that we could talk about. But I mean, man, West Side Story friggin' rocks. Like it won quite a few Golden Globes. I know Rachel Zegler as Maria, and Ariana DeBose as Anita. and it won Best Picture, then the musical or comedy category, and I think it's going to pick up a lot of Oscars, and hopefully that means people will actually finally see it, because it made no money at the box office. I don't think anybody was particularly excited about it, or maybe it just came out at just the wrong time where Spiderman was coming, and we'll talk about that one.
And COVID cases were on the rise.
Yeah, there's just there was a lot running against it. It was a
Mhm.
long movie. It was a musical. It was a remake. But what a remake! I mean, I think in almost every way that matters, it's an improvement over the original, which of course won like 12 Oscars and is a Best Picture winner. I think that there's an authenticity to the film. It embraces more of its the immigrant experience, and there's a lot of code switching where the characters are speaking in Spanish, and Spielberg was very deliberate about not using subtitles because he didn't want one language to have authority over another, so to speak. It just kind of all like mixes together. And I mean, when you watch it, if you aren't fluent in Spanish, like I know Anna really appreciated it because she is. I'm not, and I still was like, this is so cool that they're doing this. I was never like, oh, why don't they, like, I can't understand what they're saying. I understood what they were saying fine, because the acting is so expressive and the cinematography is so so good. Like there's so many there's lens flares, but they're used in such a good way. And I think he did I think he used his same cinematographer that he's always used, and he's just so good. The dancing is just insanely good, just like in the Heights. It's so fast and so rhythmic, and so like you sit there and you go, I can't even imagine how much practice these people had to put in to make this work. And unlike the original, it feels a lot more lived in. The original West Side Story has that same issue with a lot of stage to screen adaptations from that time period, from the 50s and 60s, where it's all on the soundstage and it's very obvious that it's on a soundstage. And again, a musical is not necessarily supposed to be realistic, so that's okay. But like I love that this felt lived in. They go out and dance on the streets, and there's actually people on the streets, and it's also about these old neighborhoods getting destroyed and gentrification and people coming in, and there's a clash of the sharks and the jets. There's racial animosity there, but there's also, they share kind of I almost think about it as like you have the little guys fighting each other while the big guy's up here just watching with his popcorn. The big guy being capitalism or whatever you want to call it. And it's sort of like these guys shouldn't be fighting, but of course the story is ultimately very tragic. It's Romeo and Juliet essentially, with a few twists thrown in. But I just think he made every right choice, with a few minor quibbles here and there, like some of the placement of the songs feels a little off. But I just think I was just totally enraptured the whole time, and this was I was just getting over me having COVID. I was sort of lamenting the fact that I didn't get to go have Christmas with my family, and was also just like stressed about going back to work because I was on winter break. I'm a teacher, so and we went and saw this movie, and it was like everything completely washed away for 2.5 hours, and I was just completely like zoned in and engrossed in this story. So I really do think if you consider the original a masterpiece, a classic, check this one out, because I think you might like it even more. And if you didn't get into the original West Side Story, which is totally understandable, I mean, it does feel the original is very stagey, very kind of theatrical. This version is just so good. Like I was just totally blown away by it. So yeah, that's another musical you got to check out.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it was gorgeous, and I feel like there were the knowledge of lighting and how to use lighting to really beautiful effect, I think was really cool, especially with, like he said, the lens flares. And there's one scene where there's a bunch of fabric hanging and they're walking in and out behind the fabric, and it just looks so cool. So I think that the cinematography for me was what made this movie beyond from great to excellent. And I really appreciated the kind of the honoring and legitimizing kind of the Latin American immigrant struggle, and the Spanish language being portrayed as beautiful and sharing its place with English. And I really enjoyed most of the vocal performances, and obviously dancing were really top notch. I think that was a weakness of the original, was the dubbing they used for the actress for Maria was just, I still just don't like it. And so the songs, I think, were is it Maria Ziegler? Is that her name? Is that Rachel,
yeah,
Rachel
Rachel
Ziegler, because
Ziegler,
Maria's
yeah.
the character. Yeah. Anyway, Rachel Ziegler did a great job at being very expressive, being very. It was easy to empathize with her as a character, and obviously Ariana DeBose was just amazing as Anita. She is really, really incredible. She was the
We love her.
bullet in Hamilton. She
Yeah.
was the character, one of the company dancers that would always be around when someone was going to die in Hamilton. So if you know who she is and you watch for her, you get kind of a little extra like foreshadowing going on. And so I think that her being in the background for such a big musical really taught her a lot of humility and a lot of just honing her craft in a really excellent way without the spotlight. And so when she is given the spotlight, she's incredible. Like seeing her, I think that was the best part of Schmigadoon. Schmigadoon had its own issues on Apple TV.
Yeah, Schmigadoon, she was in that too.
It was really heavy-handed, I think, in the messaging, and that really was kind of left a bad taste in our mouths a little bit. But Ariana DeBose's character, just if you can find the "Always Do Your Best with All Your Heart," I think that's the name of the song, right? On YouTube, watch it because she's tap dancing on like desks, and she's just delightful. And so seeing her, given her space on the screen in a role like that, I just loved it. I loved seeing her play a role, really get to dance, and she's incredible. I just feel like she's the Sid Charisse of her generation. If you know old movies, just so gifted.
Totally.
So I think that there were just a lot of really great performances, and like Kyle said, the dancing was spectacular, just like in The Heights. Both of those movies with these large crowd dancings were just so excellent. The precision they were able to pull off was just spectacular. So I really enjoyed it. I think I liked In the Heights more. I feel like it was more accessible in some ways. And I think that they really used their color well. And I think that West Side Story tried to get everything a sepia tone, and I wasn't as big of a fan of that. I thought it dulled down the beauty of the cinematography just a little. But overall, I think that it's a better version of that musical than the original, less problematic than the original, and more empathetic and honoring of the struggles it portrays.
Well, see, I probably would give the edge to West Side Story over In the Heights. So it's just a matter of personal preference, I think. So that's kind of interesting. There's another film that is probably going to get nominated for quite a few Oscars, but I'm going to let you go ahead and talk about it.
Okay. All right. So we got our Apple TV trial because we wanted to watch Schmigadoon originally, and we also wanted to watch some of these other films that were on there, like Coda. And Coda was definitely in my top 10. I really enjoyed it. It stands for Child of Deaf Adults, and it's the main character. She's the only person in her family that isn't deaf. She has a brother, an older brother, and her parents. And so she ends up having to translate for her family, which, gives you kind of a unique view into that culture, but also gives you empathy into like the fact that there are a lot of kids in the US who have immigrant families who have to translate for their parents. And so they're not allowed to be children. And so if you can even see that and say, what is it like for someone who has to be the interpreter, who has all this weight on them to kind of have an adult role as a child and teenager? I think that that's really part of the thing that makes the character so kind of her story make you dive in more, is seeing her struggle to have her own identity and yet have to really be the only bridge for her family between these different cultures. And as someone who took a couple semesters of sign language, most of it went over my head because it's been since college, but I just love sign is beautiful. And I think, again, it's just like these other movies giving Spanish its proper place of saying, hey, this is a beautiful language and a language that deserves a screen time. I think that all of the sign language in this movie was really great too. And it also, I mean, the subtitles here were necessary because most people don't speak ASL, but you see the humor of these characters, of the parents and the brother, and the passion that they have and the resilience that they have to try to find a way to make a living where they can't really talk to anybody. And so I think that was really, again, we're talking about empathy. Like, it gets you in the situation where you're able to see the life through someone else's shoes. And so that's just the background characters, but the main character, I loved the music in this. I loved hearing her sing. I loved the duets that she did. I loved her struggle as trying to train her voice and trying to find her place as someone who was doing something that her family could never really fully be able to appreciate, and yet she did it anyway because she was passionate about it. And there's a great scene I won't ruin where in one small way that gap is bridged. That's really beautiful. There's a couple places like that, actually.
Oh yeah, that's probably the tear welling up moment. I think it was for you for sure. Yeah, and it really it really deserves all of the attention it's getting. But I feel like Apple TV Plus, I don't know what the subscription numbers are like, but I mean, it's worth it to check some of this stuff out. It's like $5 a month, I think. So compared to Netflix, which is raising its prices again next month. So again, go ahead and you talk about the next one too. That'd be great.
Yeah, definitely. And I will say for Coda that there is some sexual content and some language just to be aware of. I feel like the story at the heart of it is very innocent, but there's definitely some stuff there. So be aware of that it might not be something for, you want to watch with kids around.
Yeah, I think the parents are a little crude.
Yeah, they are.
For sure. But I just love Marlee Matlin. I've always liked her. So she does a really good job as the mom. And then the dad, Troy Kutzer, I think is his name. Like he might win Best Supporting Actor.
Oh yeah.
Which he would be the first deaf actor. I know the guy in that other one, the one about the drummer.
Oh, yeah. Oh gosh, now I'm forgetting too. Anyway,
Sound Metal.
Yeah.
People were saying he was going to be the first one, but he didn't end up winning. But Troy's really good in this too. And I had another thought in my head about this, and it just I would say like older. It's a good film for like older teens, but probably not for kids.
Yeah, I was saying it reminded me of like Sound of Metal that we were talking about plus Once. Like it's got that organic music within it. It's not really original music per se, but it's got that music as a part of the story, and yet it's also about people's struggles in that. And so I really, really like it.
Well, and I think I told you, but any movie that has an emotional climax built around a Joni Mitchell song is automatically going to be in my top 20. Like just, my heart is just here you go. Anyway, all right, go ahead.
Okay. So another movie that came out for the previous Oscar season, but we weren't able to see until this year's Minari. And I keep feeling like I'm saying the same thing, but I think that this movie as well just really immerses you in someone else's experience in a way that helps you to have compassion. And so this was a family of Korean immigrants and their struggles, and especially, it shows their kids. There's also interesting amounts of code switching between them of when they speak English versus Korean. And their relationship with the grandmother. And it's all just a very small story in some ways of just watching their struggles and watching them work through this and watching the parents work through their own tensions about how to make money and how to survive, and kind of losing sight of a family for the sake of trying to make income and the ways that they kind of come to piece together with that. So it was just a beautiful movie. It knew what it was. It didn't try to be big budget. It just told a really compelling and honest story.
Well, and I think that there were some real genuine scenes of people of faith portrayed in a positive way, like them getting connected to the local church, and the way they were helping them, the family through that, was really cool. And again, this movie won Oscars, and I'm not going to be able to remember her name, but the woman that played the mother or the grandmother that won Best Supporting Actress, just she was so delightful. Look up her Oscar speech, because I was just like, oh my gosh, yay! Someone who's like not like established really. I mean, maybe she is in Korea, but it was just like, oh, it was just so nice.
Yeah,
like,
that was great.
I love this resurgence of Korean cinema, Parasite and Bong Joon-ho, and then this was obviously a very, very different type of film, but I just think that they really got something going on there in Korea when it comes to movies. So, all right. Well, hey, we've reached the point where we're ready to talk about Marvel stuff.
Yeah. It's a great year when Marvel is, the biggest budget stuff, and it's actually like toward the end of the top. So it's instead of the top. That's really great that there's so much other smaller stuff that made it,
But it's also great that these movies are as good as they are. Shang-Chi is just, I think we saw it in 3D
twice.
In the theater. We saw it twice. And you go, oh, do they still make movies in 3D? Yeah, if you go to the right theater. We have AMC A-List, and so they had it at one of our theaters. And Anna kind of would go, she kind of will do some research on whether movies we're seeing in 3D. She's good at that kind of stuff. But she was just like, I think this one's really we're seeing in 3D. And I was like, all right, 3D, whatever. And so we went and saw it in 3D, and oh my gosh, it was so cool.
In the first 5 minutes, I was like, this is going to be a 9 or 10 right now.
It was a gorgeous, I just love the fact that we got sort of a mainstream martial arts movie in the tradition, and it, you know, a good chunk of the movie is not in English, you
Which
know,
is
so there's that
awesome
too.
too.
It's not just like a whitewash story; it's a truly Asian cast, um, and I feel like there was some controversy among the casting with some of these other films, with In the Heights being representing the community authentically, and also with Ryan the Last Dragon.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like this one, people were like, okay, they got it right this time.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know, just a great story, and really fun characters, obviously, because it's a Marvel movie, and really, really great, terrific action. Yeah, it gets a little CGI heavy towards the end for my taste, but like some of that early stuff is just breathtaking, and
Mm-hmm.
it felt like I was watching, you know, Zhang Yimou's House of Flying Daggers at times, or Hero, or one of those, you know. And I thought, oh, I'm comparing those to a Marvel movie.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty cool. And you know, Destin Cretton, he actually went to Point Loma Nazarene, which is my college, and I've been, you know, really excited and cheering him on first. And so it's great to see these really, really good indie filmmakers come up and get this. You know, he did Short Term 12, he did Glass Castle, he did Just Mercy, which, you know, for me, it's 3 for 3, and now he's 4 for 4. I mean, he brings a really personal and very emotional touch to these to this films, and the fact that, you know, he's an Asian filmmaker himself. There's an authenticity to it, you know. Him and the other one, Ryan Coogler, who did Black Panther, it's kind of the same thing. Like, I met him at Sundance when I was there in college. Got to go to Sundance for a class, pretty dang cool. And he, you know, he had his first movie there, Fruitvale Station, and I got to meet him, and I'm like, man, this guy's going places. And then he gets like this, you know, billion, you know, several $100 million budget to make these movies, and it's sort of like, yes, he made it. And I'm like, yes, finally people are seeing how good of a filmmaker Destin Cretton is. And Joel West, who does all his music, also a Point Loma grad, so they've kind of like gone through this together. And I mean, it's just cool because it's like, you know, I went to a really small school, so like to have someone being this successful, it's very exciting. So
Mm-hmm.
anyway, loved it,
Yeah.
loved it. You want to say anything about
Yeah.
Shang-Chi
Oh,
before?
yeah.
Yeah.
And I just really, I loved how it didn't take itself too seriously. I think some of these Marvel movies are just, you know, like Eternals was just too self-serious. Like, it was kind of joyless compared to.
As much as I love Chloe Zhao, yeah, that one was a little rough. Honestly.
Yeah, it really was. And so this movie was just a delight from start to finish. It was so much fun. It was so, like, the action was so good. You go into kind of the struggles of some of these characters, but not in a way that really feels like it bogs the story down. And
yeah, this movie moves.
I actually,
it moves.
some people say Aquafina's not that funny in this movie, but I thought she was great. I thought she was the perfect choice for that character. And
I think the people who say Aquafina aren't funny in this movie are the people who don't find her funny in anything.
Yeah,
you either find her funny or you don't, and that's totally fine.
And I think that's what's so fun about it, is that, like, you don't really, when you watch most Marvel movies, you don't see outside people looking at how crazy this stuff is. And so having Aquafina react in, like, the bus fight scene, which was such a cool scene, seeing her, like, react to this and kind of, like, freaking out, and you're like, yeah, this is pretty weird, you know? Like,
it's kind of nice to have an everyman in this story who's just like, well, I kind of felt that way about, well, to a certain extent in Hawkeye with Kate Bishop too, where it's sort of like, especially when she's seeing this stuff going on as a kid, like she's seeing the Avengers fight in New York City, and it's sort of like, yeah, how would you react to that if you were just some average person?
Yeah.
That stuff is really interesting.
Do people have superhero insurance in this world? Like that, I've always wondered.
Yeah. Well, especially if you go into, especially when you go into the DC universe and you got Superman, you know, destroying a city.
Does someone cover that?
Just like, thanks, buddy. You know, and then you're starting to get into The Boys and some of these, like, you know, or Watchmen, where it's like, yeah, they're like legitimately killing people and hurting people, and they're supposed to be the heroes. But
yeah,
that's a different conversation.
Anyway, that's a different conversation. But the things that we talk about. But what I did really enjoy about this was that kind of how much fun it was. I think that we all needed that, and so in some ways, that kind of laughter and fun was really healing about this movie. And again, it addresses family and these ties that we make and our identity within that, and how we rise above the the roles in the past and what people expect us to be versus who we become, and the ways that we're a combination of those people who have gone before us. And so I thought that inner kind of struggle of the main character to find who he was and to embrace that, and also like move past the choices that were made in the past, was actually really good too. And man, it looked amazing in 3D. I mean, the production design was just fantastic.
Yeah, I feel, there are some movies that's like, okay, yeah, most people waited till it was on streaming because of COVID, and, a smart move. But I do feel very lucky that we got to see it in the theater in 3D, and kind of the same with, like we were talking about with Summer of Soul. It's like, yeah, we could have watched it on Hulu the same day, but it was in a theater, and we don't have to pay anything extra because AMC A-List is the best.
Yep.
And then, of course, the other one, I'm sure you have never heard of this little indie gem, Spider-Man No Way Home. Spoilers for this one, because I just have to geek out about it.
All right. Yep. So at this point, you can fast forward to, I'll put in the description when we stop talking spoilers. Okay. So
all right. Yes. Yeah. Anyway, if you haven't seen it yet, you're probably, you either aren't going to see it ever, or you've seen it like 4 times already. So anyway, this one I've been, waiting. I have a Spider-Man blanket right here
that I got him.
That
he was using my pink blanket, and he needed an awesome one.
One of my most treasured movie memories is my mom picking me up from school early, so we could go wait out in the line to get tickets to see Spider-Man. This is Sam Raimi's 2002 Tobey Maguire Spider-Man. Ever since then, been completely obsessed with Spider-Man, with the character. Never been a comic reader, but this kind of got me into this world of comic movies, and that movie was so revolutionary because it was like the first truly successful comic book movie. There were good comic book movies and superhero movies before Spider-Man, but like this one where it just kind of entered the cultural consciousness and conversation. And it's been a very kind of rocky and winding path in terms of Spider-Man on film. You had the Raimi trilogy that ended on a really bum note. I don't think anybody would call Spider-Man 3 their favorite of the original trilogy. Then Sony rebooted it with Andrew Garfield. We got 2 of those, and Amazing Spider-Man 2 was just not good. So you probably don't need to be completely honest. Especially now that this one I'll talk about in a minute. But and then we had the Tom Holland trilogy, which I've really enjoyed. If you're willing to take the other Marvel MCU tie-ins, which are there's a lot, but what I liked about this one is that so you have this multiversal, you have the multiverse, right? You got Doctor Strange, and they're talking about that basically the multiverse breaks open, and then there's these villains from these other universes come in. So all of a sudden you got Doc Ock, and it's the original Doc Ock. You got Green Goblin, Willem Dafoe, so good. You got Sandman comes back, Lizard. You got is that it?
The
Electro.
Electro, yeah.
Yeah, Jamie Foxx is Electro, and so it's cool because these characters, and when you watch the trailers for it, you think, okay, maybe they're just going to come in and they're just going to kind of be these villains that are just sort of walking about or whatever, and then he defeats them or whatever. And then it's like, no, they actually have like full and legit redemptive arcs, because at the end of it, Spider-Man, Tom Holland really wants to save these villains, because he knows that as soon as they go back, they're going to get killed in their respective universes. And if you've seen the movies, you know that all these villains do die in these movies. And so he tries to redeem them, and he tries to or cure them, in some cases from their, like he makes a chip so that Doc Ock, the arms aren't telling him all the bad things to do anymore, for example, or there's some kind of serum to reverse Green Goblin's like insanity, and there's this thing that'll get the electricity out of Electro. Anyway, really great, clever concept. Gets even better when the other Spider-Men come back, and this is just the geeky squee moment of the year.
Although that Matt Murdock moment was also like, as Daredevil fans, we were like,
oh yeah, they're like, hey, guess what? The Defenders on Netflix. Let's put that in the MCU too. And it was just like this throwaway. It's like one scene, but you're just like, oh, whoa! I was not expecting that. So this movie has a ton of jaw-dropping, like, mic drop moments, but, and everybody's going to have, and it was interesting because I had a conversation after another movie with a kid, like a middle school kid, and we were talking about Spider-Man, and I was saying, the most emotional moment for me was when Tobey came back. Tobey Maguire. I feel like he's just such a comforting presence, and he was just so like as the senior Spider-Man, he was just such a I don't know. It was just, there's this moment where he's telling Andrew Garfield that he's not a failure, and that because Andrew Garfield's version. I'm gonna get a little teary-eyed because Andrew Garfield's version, he failed to save Gwen Stacy, his love interest in his universe, and I felt like when Tobey was saying those lines, I was like, he's talking to me. He's talking to everybody.
You are amazing.
You are amazing. Like, and I mean, just like this. Don't we all need to hear that right now? It's so beautiful. But anyway, this kid I was talking to, he grew up on the Garfield Spider-Man, so he had a different He had a more emotional reaction to Garfield, and I do think that Garfield's performance in this is really, really stinking good. And I mean, he's, he was in Tick, Tick, Boom. He might win an Oscar for that. He's had a heck of a year. He was also in Eyes of Tammy Faye. Really, really good in that too. But I feel like, some of these like Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin, like, holy flippin' moly. He just did a hell of an acting job in this movie. Like, having to switch back and forth between like the innocent victim, and then he kind of sort of betrays everybody and he's like as wicked as ever, and just that laugh comes back, and the goosebumps all up and down. I did tell Anna that I was just seeing the wrapping up this trilogy the way they did. I think thematically it's actually a very heavy movie. There's a lot of drama and a lot of tragic things that happen, and when you get to the end, I was just like, this, I do not want Peter Parker to be in this situation. I don't want him, in order to solve this problem, he has to make a huge sacrifice. And I just hated it. Like, I mean, I think that it makes sense for the arc of the character and where they were going with the story. But I just love him too much to see him suffer this way. And so the ending was deeply, deeply upsetting to me. Like, I was very emotionally like torn. So the movie as a whole is really, really great. But yeah, I'd be curious to know what other people thought of the way it ended, because I was just very upset. I will say that I was a little distraught for a while. Like, I needed a good like cry and a good like a good like cuddle from my wife. Like, all of those beautiful moments are basically retconned for for a really good reason. I'm not going to act like it doesn't make sense what happens, but it's just I wish they would have been able to give him a little more measure of happiness.
Definitely.
I'm still
I'm
still crying about it.
His strength, I feel like, as Spider-Man, is that like vulnerability and compassion. And so to see someone with such deep emotional like range and depth as a character have to suffer this utter loneliness and desolation was just like heartbreaking, especially after the loss he experiences in the movie. And so it was just, during the movie itself, I was like, oh my gosh, this is gonna be a top 10 of the year for me. But at the end, I was like, I just can't. Like, the way it ended was just too sad. And also, honestly, you can't think about it too much. If you think about it too much, you're going to be like, so computer memories were erased too? Like, I mean, it's magic, but like,
I think,
like, how does any of this work?
Did Ryan George talk about that in Pitch? We love Pitch Meeting.
Oh yeah, he might
Ryan
have.
George on YouTube Pitch Meeting, Screen Rant. Yeah. I think he mentioned something about that, like, because he'll get into the really nitpicky stuff, and I mean, there's a lot you can nitpick about this movie. I mean, for sure. And maybe even some super valid criticisms. So yeah, but I mean, overall, just an emotional roller coaster in good and bad ways.
Oh yeah. And I really enjoyed when everything goes crazy in his life, and you see the ways that Ned and MJ are there for him in the midst of that. I loved them working together. I thought that was really delightful. There were a lot of great emotional moments, and there were a lot of great moments of just seeing Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield playing Spider-Man again and working together. And someone remarked how interesting it was that you really don't see Tobey Maguire in the Spider-Man outfit